Noah's Ark isn't just an ancient tale of a literal flood and divine punishment. It's a precise manual for navigating the psychological collapse of your own world. Our guest today, Frank Onaisi, in his book, The Ark of Mind, Noah, the Flood, and the Inner Sanctuary, presents this biblical narrative as an esoteric guide for surviving personal crises and building a truer reality. Frank, this idea that the flood story is an inner map rather than historical fact is quite a departure from traditional readings. How do you arrive at this interpretation?
William, the premise is that the story of Noah and the Ark, read inwardly, is the oldest and most precise manual ever written for surviving the collapse of a world, your world, and building a truer one out of the wreckage. Ancient contemplatives understood that a wooden boat cannot save a man from a psychological crisis, and that the God who is love does not drown his children for spite. They read Scripture as a map of the inner life, seeing figures like Noah as our own awakened consciousness, the corrupt earth as our expired self-concept, and the flood as a necessary cleansing. It's not a statement of historical fact, but an invitation to contemplative and imaginative practice, helping us understand what to do when our 3D world does not just resist us, but completely collapses.
So, the first step in this inner work, according to your book, is understanding the corruption of the earth. You explain this not as moral failing, but as an expired reality. That's a significant reframe. Can you elaborate on what an expired reality means and why it necessitates a flood?
Absolutely. Read inwardly, the corrupt earth is your own present reality and old self-concept, grown so misaligned with your true potential that it can no longer stand. It's not about wickedness in a moral sense, but expiration. A reality becomes corrupt when the self-concept that generated it has been outgrown. The job that once fit you no longer does. A relationship built on an old lack cannot hold a new fullness. Financial habits of old fear cannot house new abundance. The world is failing not because you've done something wrong, but because the self that built it has expired. This collapse is often the first sign of your growth, a larger self pressing against the walls of an old structure.
And you link this corruption to violence. When a reality is expired, it becomes filled with violence. But how does misalignment manifest as violence?
The violence, read inwardly, is the mounting strain of forcing an expired reality to continue. It's the exhausting effort required to keep a structure standing that's meant to come apart. You feel this when everything takes more force than it should, when you're fighting harder simply to stand still. This mounting strain is the violence that fills a corrupt earth. It's the sign that you are forcing an expired reality, holding it together by violence because it's no longer held together by alignment. The futility of patching is then revealed. You cannot repair what has expired. You cannot build a new life on a rotten foundation. The flood, in this sense, is mercy. It ends the violence of patching and allows for renewal.
It's a powerful reframing. Collapse as clearing, not catastrophe. Once we recognize this, the next step is pitching the ark, which you define as building a waterproof mind. Many people might equate building the ark with simply visualizing their desires, but you emphasize the sealing as the most crucial element. Why is that?
Because a vessel with holes will sink, no matter how much faith the captain has. You can build a magnificent vision of your desire, a focused imagination richly furnished, but if it's not sealed, the floodwaters of contrary facts will seep in and founder it. The sealing, or the pitch, is not a minor detail. It's the difference between floating and drowning. This pitch is the disciplined protection of your attention, applied both within and without. To seal it without is to close your attention to terrifying facts, preventing external panic from leaking in. To seal it within is to keep your faith from leaking out through complaint or anxious recounting of troubles. Most people do neither, letting panic in and faith out. The double seal makes it truly waterproof.
So it's about being ruthlessly protective of your attention. That sounds like it could be interpreted as denial or actively ignoring reality, which for many feels counterintuitive and perhaps even irresponsible in a crisis.
It's not denial, William. The flood is real. The facts exist. It's a refusal to let the flood into the ark. You don't pretend the water isn't rising. You simply refuse to let it pour through your attention into your inner state. This ruthless sealing is the discipline of closing seams. Stop watching the news that feeds fear, stop obsessively checking symptoms, stop discussing fears with those who amplify panic. These are open seams. The flood also enters through slow leaks, habitual worry, constant checking, not just sudden waves. This discipline is sustainable, not heroic. It's not about fighting every fearful thought, but calmly and consistently refusing entry, like keeping a door closed. It also extends to whom you let aboard. Some people, however loving, carry waters that would flood your ark. You can love them deeply, but still protect your inner state.
Once the ark is sealed, you talk about gathering the pears, not saving the old structures, but the seeds of the new world. You also mentioned bringing in clean versus unclean desires. What's the distinction here, and how does this selective gathering prepare you for the new reality?
The hard clarity of the flood is that you cannot save the old world structures. They belong to the corrupt earth. But you must save the seeds, your living desires. You cannot carry the old job, but you can carry the desire for meaningful work. These animals must come in male and female, meaning each desire must be paired with the felt emotion of its fulfillment. A clear intention without the feeling is barren. Only the paired desire, say the intention of health, joined to the felt sense of vitality, carries generative power. As for clean and unclean desires, this is a sorting. The clean desires are those aligned with your true good, life-giving. The unclean are merely reactive cravings, wishes born of the fear the flood is meant to wash away. In crisis, we're tempted to carry every desire, even the fearful ones. But bringing unclean desires into the new world plants the seeds of the old corruption. We must favor the clean, those desires that truly matter and align with our deepest good, preserving a few living, clear seeds over a multitude of half-dead wants.
So, with the ark built, sealed, and laden, the next crucial step is shutting the door. But the text says, the Lord shut him in, not Noah. This implies a surrender of agency at the most critical moment. How does this work? And how do we reconcile building the ark with then letting go?
It's a profound teaching. Noah does his part. He builds the ark, loads it, enters it. But the final sealing, the complete withdrawal from the senses, is not something the conscious will can fully accomplish. The Lord here is your own deep operant I am, the creative power below the straining surface will. The conscious will keeps one anxious foot in the doorway, monitoring its own progress. You cannot force your way into the perfectly sealed state. It's a letting go. You enter by withdrawing your attention, and then you release the effort. The complete detachment arrives not when you force it, but when you stop forcing it. This sealed state removes you from the flood, not because the crisis isn't real, but because you've withdrawn from perceiving it. It's a sanctuary where the seeds are kept safe. This surrender is not passive, it's an active letting go after doing all you can, allowing the deeper power to seal you in.
This leads directly into riding the waves. You present the radical idea that the crisis itself becomes the means of elevation. It's difficult to accept that a devastating illness, job loss, or divorce could actually lift you higher. How does one go from being crushed by a flood to being lifted by it?
This is the metaphysical secret at the heart of the story. The same water that destroys everything on the ground does not crush the ark. It bears it up. The crisis itself is rising water. Whether it drowns you or lifts you depends entirely on whether you meet it from the ground of the old self-concept or from inside the sealed ark of a disciplined imagination. When you stay peaceful and hold your assumption inside the ark, even as a wave of crisis crashes, your consciousness expands. The effort of remaining sealed and peaceful against that pressure strengthens you. Every time you choose peace over panic, assumption over fear, you rise higher. The bigger the wave, the greater the elevation if you meet it from the ark. You stop fighting the waves and start riding them. The worse the world looks, the more aggressively you climb in consciousness. This isn't spiritual bypassing, it's using the crisis as resistance against which your consciousness grows strong, turning catastrophe into ascent.
So after the waters have done their work of lifting, then comes the raven and the dove, which you interpret as two kinds of thought. Many people, understandably, would be anxious and analytical after such a crisis. Why is the raven a problematic approach, and how do we learn to send the dove?
As the crisis recedes, we inevitably send out mental messengers to assess our situation. The raven, read inwardly, is the anxious, hyper-analytical thought. It flies to and fro restlessly, obsessing over remaining problems, picking over the debris of past mistakes. It feeds on death, finding no peace and bringing none. The dove, in contrast, is peaceful expectation. It flies out not to feed on debris, but to seek new life. It finds the olive leaf, the first sign of the new reality taking root, because it's looking for it. Both birds fly over the same receding waters, but what they seek determines what they find. The discipline is to monitor the thoughts you dispatch. When you catch yourself sending ravens, stop. Deliberately turn your attention from the wreckage to the emerging good, from anxious analysis to peaceful expectation. The olive leaf, the synchronicity, the breakthrough, these come to the peaceful mind that is looking for them.
Finally, we arrive at the rainbow covenant, which signifies a permanent transformation. What is this covenant, and how does it change an individual's relationship to future storms?
The rainbow is the bridge between imagination and reality, appearing when the light of consciousness shines through the lingering droplets of a passing storm. The covenant itself is absolute trust in the law, an unshakable knowing, established by surviving a flood, that your inner world dictates your outer reality. It's not a promise that no storms will come, but that no storm can ever again destroy you, because you now know how to meet it. This trust is qualitatively different from pre-flood faith. Before, you might have believed the law. After surviving a flood by retreating into the ark and manifesting a new reality, you know it as proven fact. This knowing, once established, doesn't fade. You are permanently changed. The covenant is visible precisely against the clouds of future storms, reminding you that you have survived such skies before. It's a permanent competence. You now know how to build the ark, and that every flood met from within the ark will only carry you higher.
Frank, you also include case studies and a crucial sober companion throughout the book, reminding readers that inner work is never a substitute for professional help. Can you quickly touch on why that balance is so vital?
Yes, it's a critical point I emphasize throughout. The floods this book speaks of, like job loss, illness, or divorce, are real and grievous. The inner work of the ark is offered as a way to keep your faith and peace through such storms, but it is never a replacement for practical help, medical care, counsel, or community. Build the ark, but also reach for every human hand that is offered you. The ark and the helping hand are not rivals. The inner work and outer support are not enemies. You take both.
It's an incredibly rich and insightful interpretation. Frank, thank you for guiding us through this esoteric reading of Noah's Ark and for sharing the wisdom from your book, The Ark of Mind. This episode might just change how you approach the storms in your own life. Consider sharing it with someone navigating a flood right now.